reason I call it weightlifting is a waste of time is because weightlifting is a waste of time.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today, we're speaking with the Wall Street Journal's best-selling author and inventor who believes weightlifting and cardio are a complete waste of time. In our conversation, we dive into his research-based but controversial approach to strength training, muscular development, and diet. We also address the criticism he's been receiving online for some of his radical ideas. So for a different perspective on working out, please welcome the author of Weightlifting is a Waste of Time and the inventor of Osteo Strong and the X3 bar, Dr. John Jaquish, to the Escape Your Limits podcast.
Something that got me in a lot of trouble as a kid. I was always like the class clown. And when someone tells me I can't do something, I'm fucking doing it. You can't drive your car 200 miles an hour. Really? I hand the, I probably shouldn't say anything else. It'd be pretty incriminating, but yeah, like.
You're a rebel.
I'm just not gonna be told what to do. And when somebody says you can't, or that's not the way it works, I say, are you sure? Like 2 masks are better than 1. Where's the evidence on that? Like I jumped all over people that were like all of a sudden wearing like the 2, coronavirus masks. Where'd you read that? Give me that clinical reference. It turns out it was bullshit. Fauci just made it up. He admitted, sorry, I didn't have any evidence, but so I'm always second guessing what I'm told, which is why I actually like, about half of the trolls are just skeptics. Half the people are like, yeah, they're angry, yeah, they're dumb because they spoke before they read. So they didn't really know what they were talking about. But then I'll say something, and usually the ruder I am, the more they'll want to read the book so they can criticize me more. So it's kind of by design. Like I really want to rattle the cages because they all come over. And my biggest haters have multiple versions of my product. They just want to, they just hate the fact that I'm successful. And I can't do anything for them. Like I really wish I could help them, but they want to see me burn. Well, I'm not going to do that. So I'm not quitting anytime soon. And everything's getting bigger and better all the time, including me. So, I'm sorry guys, but it's the way it is. So, they love the pictures with, my Lamborghini and on great vacations. And, I got a lot of hate out of, doing a workout in front of the Parthenon from my hotel balcony window. They're really mad about that, but it's like what they're really mad at is themselves because they haven't done anything. They're pretty sad people. Like there's an article in Forbes that says internet trolls are just losers, and that's what they're angry at themselves because they've never succeeded. So they see someone who's successful, especially in the space that they're in, and it makes them very hateful because it's an everyday they see me, it's a reminder that they've not achieved. And so
and I guess
I'd really rather them focus their energy instead of yelling at me. It's like the expression, winners focus on winning, losers focus on winners. Losers are always complaining about the winner. No, don't look at the winner, look at the finish line. Like, I'm not stopping them from doing anything. They can do something creative, that's fine. Or get a better job, maybe, I don't know.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it from me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
So Dr. John Jaquish, I've got it right that time.
Yeah, you did.
Thank you so much for coming to see us in Newport Beach, all the way down from San Francisco.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting part of this conversation was off camera, but unfortunately we can't share that with anyone.
Yeah, well, it's okay. Let the people wonder.
Yeah. So I've been reading your book, and it's kind of, it's quite controversial, or very controversial, I guess. Was that intentional?
Well, my read of the academic literature puts me in a position where I'm just going to say what it says, and so if I don't see why that's controversial. It's the results of research, and if somebody wants to cry about it, well, that's like being a science denier. You can have 62 different genders in weightlifting too, right. Because there's both of those can be easily defeated by looking at scientific literature. So I don't particularly see why, when something can be proven scientifically, it's a controversial stance. But for example, Twitter considers the word steak like one of the ones that has to be somebody has to review the post, because they might want to ban you or delete your post. Steak.
Yeah? Why is that? Is that got some sort of...
Well, I mean, because they'll do whatever vegans want, but they won't conform to anything that promotes the eating of animals.
Right.
Right. So, just complete loss of free speech on social media. I mean, that's nothing new. We've all heard that. But, so, I mean, the fact that I promote having a heavier animal protein approach to nutrition, I don't think that should be controversial, but apparently it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So weightlifting is a waste of time, and cardio. What is it? And cardio makes you fat.
No, I said cardio is too, and there's a better way to get the body you want.
Right.
Yeah.
So what motivated you to sort of put that book out? It certainly got my attention when I heard about it, and,
sure.
And I'm sure it's a great headline. But what was your motivation to put it together?
Motivation to put it together, or call it what I called it?
Both.
Okay. I wanted a resource where I had all the information in one place. There's a lot of things that myself and my company recommend, and those things, they were scattered in different videos, and some of them were on Vimeo, and some of them were on YouTube, and then there's always somebody who's like, well, I don't watch YouTube videos, I'm too busy. And it's a 2-minute video, and they're like, well, I don't care. So it's hard to keep everybody happy. So what I want to do is just get all the information to date that we have thus far about the absolute optimal exercise and the absolute optimal nutrition. Get it all in one place. So that was the intention. The reason I call it weightlifting is a waste of time is because weightlifting is a waste of time. I can back that up with, there's 250 studies in the book. And just total. When I did my research with my medical device, which is called Osteo Strong, there's clinics all over the world, 8 different countries we have clinics. But when I was doing that for the medical device, I participated from a methods perspective only. So what that means is I authored just the section of how the principal investigator and other technicians were going to approach running the study, because I'd have a conflict of interest, being a data collector, I can't do that. So they collected all the data and they reported the outcome. But while that was happening, some of the test subjects in the study were physicians that worked at the hospital, and it was done in East London, which is how I know so much about East London. So it was actually at the Stratford Village Surgery where that went down. And then University of East London students and professors participated in the authoring of the paper. So when that was happening, I looked at what deconditioned people, like elderly women, 55 plus, postmenopausal, that's not really elderly. So older women who were never athletic in their lives. And they were pushing 6, 7, 8, even 9 times their body weight. They were contracting against that after 6 months of therapy. And I thought, well, that's crazy amounts of force. And the physicians were looking at the forces and saying, what is this compared to regular weightlifting? And so I went to the NAIDS database, which is maintained by the National Institute of Health. So it's the biggest sort of health and fitness database in the world. And they interview 2,000 people a year and have been doing it for about 10 years. So there's 20,000 people in there now. And so you look at the average loading when people load their lower extremities. So they have a number for that and like everything else you can imagine. And it turns out that the differences between the impact ready range of motion, which is like this, 120-degree angle from upper to lower arm, and back of the hand in line with the clavicle. So you can either absorb or create the greatest amount of force right here.
Right.
This is how you trip and fall and brace yourself. So the difference between that position and the weakest range of motion, which is like at the bottom of the sort of chest press type movement, is 7-fold. So there's a 7-fold output capacity difference. Weightlifting is useless because now we know if you're trying to exhaust the musculature and you're choosing the weight based on what you can handle in the weakest range, which everyone does, that's what you have to do, well, because you got to be able to handle it. Well, then you're stimulating very little.
Right.
So you're really only fatiguing the cells that are active in the weaker range of motion and not in the stronger range. And Peter Attia had said this a couple of times. You know who Dr. Attia is?
No.
He's a really, really famous. He's been on all kinds of TV programs and just speaks about health in general and comments on a lot of like fad diets and stuff like that. He's a very smart guy. And he says, I've never liked weight training because it overloads joints and underloads muscle. So people ultimately just end up getting injured.
Right.
And I love that because it was like he was thinking exactly the same thing I was thinking when looking at my data. The difference is I had the quantifiable data. He's making an observation.
Okay.
And so I decided, okay, I got to do something with this data. I'm the only one in the world that has this. So I got to do something with it.
Is that because you're the only one who's just spent the time trying to collect all the stuff together?
Yeah. So I knew I was the only one looking at probably the most profound data that will ever be seen in fitness. And what do I do next? So, okay, definitely if you hold X here and you hold 7X here, well, we need a weight that changes as we move. Mm-hmm. That's the only answer to that question. So, okay, what proportion do I want it to change? Because X and 7X is sort of like 1 rep maximum sort of thing. So it's got to be dialed back a little bit. And there was some power data that I also had that I gathered in kind of a proprietary way to figure out exactly what we need for repetitions. Mm-hmm. So I used that ratio. Yeah. And then really identified certain positions and how we would pull off something. And in theory, I was just going to write a book about band training, just rubber band training. And I was at the time, still am, having OsteoStrong grow. And I already had a job. I'd already invented something, and it was great, and everything was going fantastic. But I thought, okay, once I looked at this band training thing, I realized what I would ultimately end up recommending would be too dangerous to ever use, because if you throw a band around your back and you have it running across your hands, and then you go try and do a push-up with the kind of weight you would need to actually stimulate strength, you'd break both wrists. Right. So it just wouldn't work with band training. And the bands would need to be different than the bands that had ever existed in the market. So I needed to design bands that would hold 400, 500, 600, 700 pounds. And that's the tension they would deliver.
So with that, just for a second, so with that sort of idea that you're explaining, so when I read your book, I was trying it, I was doing some bodyweight stuff with dips, and I kind of understood, like if you did say 10 reps, full reps in a dip, you'd get to a stage where you couldn't push yourself up anymore, but you could, when you was at the top, you could kind of almost do like half reps for probably another 10 or 20 that you couldn't do. So is that, what you're explaining, is that a similar thing that is happening to the muscle where
No.
It's not?
No,
So
because that's the same weight you're dealing with. It's not changing the weight.
Okay, but what about the volume? Because I guess, like normally I'd have finished at 10 reps because I can't do 10, but if I'm doing half reps, I'm arguably putting more volume through the muscle than if I was just finishing because I couldn't lift myself in a full range anymore.
You still wouldn't go to the same level of fatigue. It would not be as effective.
Okay.
Because in the weaker range, you have less musculature firing, especially when you've exhausted the stronger range first, because that casts aside some of the cells. So some of the cells stop participating in increasing tension.
Right.
Because they've fatigued.
Okay.
And it's the percentage, but you want to get to the lowest percentage possible when you finally fatigue. But like I'll use a chest press as an example. So when I chest press, I'm holding 550 pounds at the top.
Right.
And then as I lower, it gets to 300 pounds. And then when I get to the bottom, well, there's still tension. I never let tension go.
Okay.
This is about 100 pounds right here.
Okay.
So I get to the point where I do 20 or plus repetitions with the 550. And
so you're doing full. So what you're doing is full
repetitions.
Reps, but as you're pushing the weight up and bringing it down, you're going through different levels of resistance as opposed to doing full reps and then finishing off with a partial range. Is that what you're doing? If you weren't using a band, if you're using a weight or something, you would.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
But I haven't touched a weight in years.
Right.
Because it's so inefficient. Like why try and why try and use the wrong tool?
Right.
Like the weight is just the wrong tool. So even doing partials and trying to skip the weak range, that you're still just scratching the surface of the potential of the kind of fatigue you can have. Because the way I do it, the way X3 users are all doing it, is they're fatiguing the stronger range of motion first. The way you're describing it, you never would fatigue the weaker range of motion.
Not if you, well, okay, which would be at the bottom.
Yeah, you'd never shut that down. Never.
No.
Right. With the way I'm doing it, it's strongest, medium, weakest.
Right. Oh, and you fatigue the strongest first, and then you go down to the weakest.
And this is all in one set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you still be leaving a lot of potential growth on the table.
So is that like the sort of statement? Okay, weightlifting is a waste of time. And you mentioned that earlier that there's all these different camps, in steak and fitness, for example. So is this, for the book, is it kind of like a general statement, but that you could argue, depending on what your goals were, and I guess there's some people don't just want or need to build muscle. There's other sort of reasons for sort of developing strength and maybe not muscle, and vice versa. Are you saying that this is like the best way for everything, or is it kind of more leaning towards people with a particular goal?
Oh, boy, I can answer the question either way. I mean, ultimately, nobody exercises to get weaker and fatter.
No.
They're trying to get stronger and leaner. And there is no way to make a muscle, well, there's a neurological way to make a muscle stronger and not bigger. You can just train more cells to fire. That's a pretty specific objective. And I could see that out of a gymnast or a dancer or somebody who needs to stay light but wants more explosiveness. X3 wouldn't be. It might be something that they do,
right?
But then they might not eat the same way a guy who's trying to get bigger would. But then they would have to do a lot of skill work, because neurological and skill work are the same thing.
So if you wanted to develop skill work, and I know this is sort of relatively like 10 minutes and you can be done, are you sort of missing some of that
first?
Okay, and then you would do your skill and...
Yeah, you'd have to do that.
So I think that's an important thing, because like I say, I've read a lot of stuff where people have been critical of it, and I kind of get the concept, but I suppose maybe some of the things that you've not said that maybe people would assume that you're discounting that. But are you sort of saying, look, there are, within this sort of exercise meal...
X3 is not the answer to every question.
Right.
But for 99.9% of the population, their problem isn't explosiveness. I mean, you see guys at the gym, and they're like, I'm really working on my rep speed and explosiveness, and the guy's just like a fat slob. It's just like, dude, you are years away from worrying about that. Like, how about you have it so you can wear pants that don't have an elastic waist? Like, yeah. I mean, there's shit people talk about, and then there's shit people actually need, and it's different.
Right.
So, like, while I see people saying, like, that's what I need, like, it's not what you need. You need to quit putting pizza in your mouth.
Right.
And maybe focus on some of the basic compound movements. With X3, you can gain some muscle while you're dropping fat by being in a protein surplus and a caloric deficit, which has been proven multiple times. If you're in a protein surplus and a caloric deficit, you can lose fat and gain muscle at the same time. So this whole bulking, cutting thing is just BS.
So in general, for people that, like in the general population, people that are probably out of condition, carrying too much weight, then what the X3 is a good way, effective way to sort of progress their fitness goals without spending a lot of time doing things that is probably not necessary for them, is that?
Or will hurt them.
Okay.
Yeah, I see a lot of weightlifters just doing cumulative damage to joints. And ultimately, they're not going to be lifting. Like, if they're lifting, some of the guys, I'll walk in and I'll tell them, in 5 years, you won't be able to hold a coffee cup because of your shoulders.
Right.
But,
So what's it like? What I'd like to do is probably go back to sort of not to, or rewind from a time perspective, and just to give sort of everyone an idea of where you started. So I understand that your first product, or one of your early products, was the Osteo Strong, which your mum had a bit of an influence in. Is that? Could you tell us a little bit about that story?
She was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and as I read about osteoporosis, I thought, this is a deconditioning of bone. Why don't we try and recondition the bone? I didn't like the biochemical approach that had been taken. It just didn't make sense to me. Maybe it makes sense for somebody who's immobile or can't get out of a chair. Like that person, some of the pharmaceuticals would be okay for. But and also just as a general approach, physical medicine first. Like, I say that all the time. And a physician can't argue with me when I say that. And what that means, for people who don't know, physical medicine is when you stimulate the body to create a change, and the body starts fixing itself from whatever the dysfunction is. And if there's a physical medicine approach to anything, we got to explore that option first, or a nutritional option. Now, a lot of the nutritional options, for a lot of things, there's so much conflicting evidence. Mm-hmm. There is no conflicting evidence for the two greatest drivers of long life, though, which are being strong and being lean. Two greatest drivers.
Right.
So if you want to be strong and be lean, well, it's easy to find out how to do that too, nutritionally. And that was my approach to nutrition. And it's been making X3 users very fit. Yeah, extraordinarily fit. Like putting on 20 pounds of muscle in 6 months or less.
Right. So with your mum and the Osteo Strong, then, so you wanted to go down and sort of, I guess, help your mum with her weak bones, and so what did you developed a machine specifically to do that? Right.
And those are the Osteo Strong machines.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about what they are and how you develop them and what they actually do different to regular machines then.
So we isolate the impact ready position. So what I was talking about right here.
Okay.
So when you isolate that position, and it's done in the lower extremities, spine, and core, so there's 4 movements. And we isolate those positions so that we can have the individual self-impose, guided by comfort.
Okay.
So you have to be, like, if your own neural inhibition stops you, then that's the normal process. Or something like acute pain will happen, like in the shoulder or something, and that's how we find an injury, and then we tell that individual, okay, you need to address that injury before you continue. So isolated positions, you may move 1 or 2 millimeters in one of those movements, so there is movement. but the movement is from the compression of bone and joints. Yeah. So when that happens, massive growth is triggered.
And what causes that to happen then?
Alterations in the bone matrix. So you know how the inside of a bone looks like a honeycomb? And so it's like all these little walls inside the bone. And when the bone becomes compressed from end to end, so like the humerus bone going this way and going this way. So putting compression on the bone from the top to the bottom, not side to side. That distorts the shape and length of the bone matrix. When the bone matrix has that distortion, it becomes irritated and it bounces back into position, and then it starts pulling in minerals and recalcifying to build more little walls inside of the bone to make the bone more powerful. Yeah, I mean, it's that simple.
And is that something that has, like, how long has that been going? And is that sort of, is that documented and researched that actually works? And I'm guessing it is because you've got a ton of these Osteo Strong locations.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, had a publication 2 weeks ago, or last week.
Right.
Yeah, one just published. Yeah, that was the one I was telling you about.
Right, and is that the NASA?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's in Aerospace Medicine and Human Performance Journal. It's a top journal in aerospace, aerospace physiology. And so what they're looking at is how to keep an astronaut healthy and alive. Well, first alive, then healthy, because nothing about space is healthy. And like, we love the science fiction ideas of space travel. Never going to happen. No. That's not how it's going to be at all. Like, you are being destroyed when you are outside of the Earth's gravitational pull and you're exposed to that much radiation. Your body is just dissolving.
Right.
Yeah. It is killing you very quickly. And so and those are the two challenges, the radiation and the loss of bone mass. Right. Muscle mass too, but the bone mass, you get a fracture up there, the fracture won't mend. Like, you're useless. Like, you can't do anything. So having them maintain strong bone is what the subject of the paper was, and like what. Now I'll read you a quote from what the paper said. I always want to, like, especially something this important, I want to go with quotes, because like I don't want to give my own interpretation. And I did participate as an author in the study, but similar to the other one, only in the methods. So only to make sure they use the device correctly. It said, if the exercise apparatus could be condensed to the size of a shoebox to meet the weight and volume restrictions imposed by NASA, it could potentially serve as a countermeasure for bone and strength loss on exploration vehicles. And everything NASA's focused on right now is Mars.
Right.
So we got to get somebody to Mars. We got to figure out how to keep the radiation from killing them, and get them stronger bone density.
Right. So is there a link between then improved bone density and muscle? How does that work?
Sure. Yeah. Like, look at the chassis of a Formula One car and look at the chassis of a Honda Civic. If you put a Formula One engine in a Honda Civic and tried to race it, what would happen? The thing would just come apart, right? Because it's not meant to handle that kind of power. So as your chassis improves, you can hold more musculature. Definitely let's call it a genetic potential alteration.
Right.
Yeah.
And so using the Osteo Strong machines, as well as it developing your bones through like these small movements, does that also at the same time impact the muscle development? Or do you have to do that separately off the machine?
You really have to do both.
Right.
You'd have to do OsteoStrong and X3.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so was that what you learned from the Osteo Strong, and I guess there's a lot of research that you must have done with that, did that help shape where you went in terms of understanding, training with bands? Did that impact the next?
No, I didn't understand training with bands particularly well, bands by themselves, until I just concluded that training with bands by themselves is either going to be ineffective or almost a guaranteed injury. Because that's the problem, is like you'd go to do a chest press with a band around your back, or like a push-up, and your wrists are being twisted outward.
Right.
Like, that can cause an injury that could keep you from being able to use your hand correctly.
So what about when you do when you've got like you see it's been around for years, but you actually got, say, an Olympic bar, whether you're squatting or pressing, and you have a band like on a rack.
Yeah.
So you actually, is that create, without sort of, obviously your product specifically fits those needs, but being sort of fairly open, could you sort of arguably achieve similar results by combining those two?
So one of the 16 studies that specifically say variable resistance is superior for growing muscle and developing strength to standard weightlifting. Of those 16, which are cited in the book, one of them says the greater the level of variance. So like, let's say you have a power rack with some weights on it and some bands. So the variance is this big. And then you have another setup where it's just all variance. So you're holding very little at the bottom and a crazy amount at the top. That's more like X3. Well, then the growth is like this.
Right.
So the greater the variance, the greater the response of the body.
Right. And how would you, and just so I understand what you're saying there, when you say the greater the variance, so let's stick with the Olympic bar squat with the bands on the power rack. How would you define a greater variance? Is that something to do with the band or the amount?
It would be traveling? The weight at the bottom versus the top. What's the ratio?
I'm with you. Right.
Is it, X to 5X?
Okay.
Or is it X to 1.2X?
Okay.
Which is like a lot of the people who use variable resistance in like a gym and they have weights and then they have bands. Now, if somebody were to build a power rack that just had nothing but kind of hooks and clamps all over it where you could attach bands, I mean, it may take you half an hour to set up an exercise, but could you mimic what X3 does with some giant rack with hooks all over it? Yeah, I guess, but that would cost you thousands of dollars, and X3 is $550. So why would you do that?
But the principle then that you're getting, just to
I guess what I'm saying is you don't need weight.
The principle you're saying then is essentially that if you've got this great variance between the bottom and the top, then you're getting the best impact, the best bang for your buck that you could have, and bands in general that allow you that difference is the most effective way to do that.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. So in terms of science and research, like we've been talking off camera, and you're a bit of an encyclopedia of research.
I don't forget. I do have a photographic memory.
Okay. So
like I see something once, if I find it interesting. Now if I see something I don't care about, I won't remember it for 10 seconds. Right. But I never forget. So
you're into your research. I guess two things. One, where did that come about? What's your journey in research? And then two, you can look at a lot of different. And I'm not, like I say, I don't spend my head in research papers, but from what I understand, there are a lot of different studies. Some are good, some are bad, some are biased. And there's so many variables within certain bits of research. How do you determine, can sometimes you can get research to fit your needs, and how have you been able to sort of stay relatively independent without someone saying, well, you can pick and choose what you want and then package
cherry
it
picking
up.
research.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I have a section in the book that explains why I don't cherry pick research. I actually present the opposing view also. Now, I don't need to present a library of literature that says like eating breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which was actually written by the Kellogg's family to sell cereal. That's the origin of breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So total bullshit, just selling our kids poison. So I can point that out. And also, we all have to acknowledge that there's a huge bias in like nutritional research, and this is in the cherry picking section I'm talking about, where we have to acknowledge that from slaughter to table, normally people say from farm to table, but I'm just going to keep it real. There's a 16% margin in a steak.
Margin.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
16% of what you buy it for, it goes to the people who handled it, butchered it, like, yeah. A Triscuit, which is made by Nabisco. It's a little cracker, right? There's a 600% margin in that. So who has better research? The meat producers, or is it Nabisco and Kraft and Kellogg's? Well, they have purchased research that says that eating carbohydrates is wonderful. And why do they bother doing this? Why do they want everybody to be vegan? Because vegans don't eat kale. Vegans eat cake and cookies. Because they have to eat processed foods, otherwise they can't get enough calories in their body to keep from dying. So they have to have these processed foods. So they love talking about how natural they are, like they're like some sort of tribesmen. But wait, where's the truck that's going to show up with my vegan donuts? Because they need their vegan donuts, otherwise they can't get enough calories to live. So I don't see the movement as heroic in any way. Also, farming vegetables kills 7 billion animals a year in the United States. I think we only...
Why is that? Just...
It's less than 1 million cattle are slaughtered per year.
Right. Why do vegetables kill animals then?
Destroyed habitat.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And also, like, birds are poisoned, by the millions, flying over a cornfield. Crows or, like, mockingbirds can destroy a cornfield if they don't immediately get poisoned when they fly into the cornfield. So gophers, ground squirrels, rodents in general, a deer. So I grew up in Orinda, which is like a suburb of San Francisco. But then for high school, I lived in Napa. My parents had this great spot. It was overlooking a hillside with a vineyard on it. And so I could see a deer running around in there a lot of mornings. And then I'd see the vineyard maintenance people just come out and shoot the deer. You can't tell the deer to jump back over the deer fence. He won't. He'll just stay in there and eat the product. So I could shoot him. And then, of course, they just take him to a burn pile, let him rot, and then when he dries out, they just set him on fire. Pile of dead deer. That's, that's farming vegetables. I won't say that's veganism, because I think a lot of vegans don't know that. So basically, any species that's expanding its population is going to be taking resources from another species. There's no getting around that. So vegan or meat eater, it makes no difference. You're killing things. Our existence kills other things. And we're going to continue to grow our population, which is an interesting conversation. Henry Kissinger wrote an interesting paper about that in the 1960s, which made him one of probably the most hated men in the world. But it was like about population control. Like where at some point we have to say, hey, like we got a lot of people. And like how much nature do we want to destroy to keep our population growing? And that has economic implications too, because everything is built on economic growth. Well, what if we can't have economic growth because we just have too many people? So opens up geopolitics big time when you want to talk about that. But ultimately, everything we consume is at the expense of death of animals. All right. No way around it. Now, I can eat an entire steer in a year, period. Like I can eat 500 pounds of, that's about right. I can eat 500 pounds of red meat in a year. That's one life of an animal. But if you're eating vegetables, thousands of lives.
So in terms of the research then, so what you're saying in terms of the food industry, they will cherry pick the research to kind of suit their gain, which kind of makes sense. You see it in sugar and the whole thing about fats and carbohydrates. In your sort of research then, what have you done to ensure that you're not cherry picking then?
Well, I run it by, like usually when I go to publish something, especially some of the more controversial statements, I run it by a lot of other professionals. I'll give it, like Ben Greenfield has been really nice about proofreading some stuff. because he's a middle of the road guy. Like, he'll try a certain type of veganism for a month, say how he felt. He'll try carnivore. He'll try some mixture of organ meats. The guy experiments on himself, and he's a great advocate of just like what the right answer is. Mm-hmm. So like I'll make sure that I don't do that. But also the way I approach nutrition was similar to the way I approached exercise. I saw something with exercise that was an undeniable truth. Huge difference between our power output capacity here versus here versus here versus here, and that's just the range of motion. You know, weak to strong range, huge delta in the capacity that we have. And we have to exercise accordingly. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time. So that was one thing. And then I couldn't really find the one catalyst to say like one diet was better than the other, because there's always people who there's this really obese powerlifter. He says he's like a world record holder, but no one in powerlifting has ever heard of him. No one can find a meet he's ever been to. Maybe he set a record in somebody's backyard and he said he's world champion. I don't know, but he was in Game Changers. Okay, really short, chubby guy, and he says he's never eaten meat or something like that. And talk about cherry picking. Like, this guy's just lying. Like, that's their evidence. Like, we actually have scientific studies, like the whole cholesterol thing. And I also don't want to make it an us and them, but other than all the evidence, like I said about 15 minutes ago, the two greatest drivers of long life are high levels of strength and low levels of body fat. That's uncontested. There's hardly a thing you can find in medical research that is uncontested. Well, if those things are true, and since they're uncontested, let's just assume they're 100% true, and those ideas will never be defeated. What is the optimal nutrition to get to the highest level of strength? And the optimal nutrition to get to the lowest level of body fat? It's carnivore nutrition. Right. That's the answer.
And how did you get, what was your sort of introduction, and I suppose, why did studying science and research become a kind of a passion for you? Where did you get into it? And
Well, first it was my mother.
That was where it started.
Right, and so that's where it started, and I started doing literature reviews back then, but I just noticed I was good at it. And it's because of that memory thing. Like, I can read something, and then 6 months later, I'll read another thing, and I'll be like, hey, there's a connection between this and that paper I read 6 months ago. And I would remember the author, the journal. Like, I would have the APA reference like in my head, and so I'd be able to find that other one real easy.
Did you find that also when you looked through it, and you probably looked through it than many people, but there was, you did get some sort of questionable research and studies, and if so, what were some of the red flags that you kind of looked out for to almost like say, well, look, I don't want to be using that because of X, Y, Z?
So there's a variable resistance study. There's one study that says variable resistance isn't good, and it's regular weights are better. But the study was designed with that outcome in mind, and I'll tell you why. Because some people lifted weights to whatever they could handle. That was one test group. The other test group used variable resistance training. But the banding they were given was TheraBand, 4 pounds. 4 pounds was the maximum resistance they could handle. So you gave somebody 4 pounds to train with, and then the other group could train with whatever they could handle. Well, obviously the other group did better, and the 4 pounds, that's not going to grow anything. And so it was designed to make variable resistance look bad. I don't know why the researcher wrote that. Other than just extraordinary bias, but like if you read the study, it's just garbage. It should have been thrown out.
And how much do you see of these studies are generally done to prove a point for a commercial reason, or do you get a lot of just independent stuff that just genuinely wants to try and find the truth?
Very infrequently do I read something that's with a commercial intention.
Is that because there isn't a lot of it, or because you just don't come across it?
It gets weeded out pretty easily, with the exception of nutritional.
Okay.
So a lot of nutritional research is bought and paid for.
Right.
And it's bought and paid for by Nabisco and Kellogg's and Kraft and Nestle. And they also have organizations, you know, like the, whatever they'll call it. It's sort of like a, you know, like a government in a third world country, the People's Republic. Yeah. The people have nothing to do with this. They're looking down the barrel of a gun. So it's a little bit like that, where there'll be like an institute, you know, Institute of Health and Nutrition for Longevity Research, you know, and it turns out that they're solely funded by Kraft Foods. Right. So they have surrogates that look good in name, but then when you look into them, they just work for people with you know, that sell crackers.
I guess it's a strange kind of balance, because you've probably got more research in the food because there's more money and more motivation to do it, although those studies could be biased, and you've probably got less in the strength and fitness side because there's probably not the money into it, but you've just got, you may be more honest, but there's just less of it because it's less well funded.
It's definitely smaller sample sizes in exercise science, whereas you'll get it. So this is my favorite total bullshit story about a study. A lot of nutritional research is survey based. So they tell people to take a survey. Now, are they honest in that survey? Nobody knows. Maybe they just want to give the answer that they'd like to believe about themselves. I mean, how many overweight people have you talked to that are like, I don't understand why I'm overweight. I only eat 1,500 calories a day. And you're like, oh my God, no, you don't. Like, you know, they're just lying to you, and they're lying to themselves. They're like sociopaths. They actually believe in the lie. I have an ex-girlfriend like that. So she wasn't fat, but she would lie, and then she would believe in the lie. So that's what a sociopath is, by the way. So what happens is these people they're constantly stuck in this. How do I want to say this? So, I mean, you're asking about. I want to give this the most understandable answer because I was just about to rant. You're asking, with all the biased research in nutrition, what, like, here's an example of how we can spot that. Mm-hmm. So there was a study that was written by a group of people from a Seventh-day Adventist university. So Seventh-day Adventists believe it's their mission as part of their religion to convert everyone to being vegetarian. Not vegan, but vegetarian. So they're extraordinarily biased. And then they ran a study looking at chances of colorectal cancer. And so it was a long-term survey. And so they found it was a little over 1,000 people who had said that they had eaten nitrate meat. But the word nitrate was buried down the study. The title just said meat. Nitrate meat. So what is nitrate meat? It's a preservative. Mm-hmm. So if you have preservative meats, like you really can't find them anywhere than like an Oscar Mayer hot dog. So which is, something you can keep in your freezer for a few years and then heat it up and it's fine. So they found a group of people who ate an Oscar Mayer hot dog at least once a day for 40 years. Now, did they do that for health, do you think? Probably not. This is a gas station hot dog. This is, like, in the United Kingdom, that's illegal, by the way. You can't even sell meat with nitrate in it. So this is very American. And I think they're trying to weed this out because now that this study came out. But the title said meat eaters have a 2% greater chance of colorectal cancer. But the meat eater group ate a gas station hot dog every day. Now, if somebody's going to eat a gas station hot dog, do you think there is any other every day? You think there's any other variables that might be unique to that individual, like greater alcohol consumption, tobacco consumption, hard drug use, whatever, like unhealthy lifestyle? And then, of course, anybody who's going to be a vegetarian is, they've been told, is a healthy choice. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be healthier people. They're probably going to work out. The hot dog group, probably not going to ever work out. So, like, what does that study say? It says nothing. It's a piece of trash.
It's a great soundbite, I guess.
You got to be able to know, like, when you're reading the study, like, are there any real biases in here? Like, I also don't cite any studies that were, paid for by the beef lobby, because, okay, I mean, it's their business. I understand, but they may come up with a great study, and then somebody may be trying to disprove them, or has an open mind and says, well, they might be right, and replicate that study, but it's an independent, non-biased group. That's the study I'm going to cite. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of coming back to the workout part, like you mentioned that you can actually do this band training in about 10 minutes a day, which seems quite a short amount of time. I know you can get tough workouts and that, but what's the sort of basis of being able to, like, you're pretty buff, and you're not 25 years old either. I guess
Nope.
26, is that right?
Sure.
So are you getting that from just the band? I'll use band training because I don't want this to seem as though we're just sort of pushing a particular thing. But are you getting that from training out in this particular way?
Yeah, I train with remember, you can't train with bands, because bands, if you get heavy enough for them to be relevant to strength, they will twist your joints and injure you. So bands by themselves are worthless. So you have to have the Olympic bar, and you have to have the plate that keeps your ankles from being twisted. So the whole idea of the product is really protecting the smaller joints of the body, and then putting tremendous loads through the body, because the body can handle it in the specific positions. So I started using X3 after I turned 40, and I'm 44 now. So I have put on 60 pounds of muscle since then. So in 4 years, I'm completely different. Yeah. And I was kind of chubby when I started. I was 16% body fat. And I was working out, but I was using weights, and I'm also bothered in general, and the back cover of the book hits on this, and I have references in the book that really look at, like, how fit do people get with standard fitness? And I think that's a great starting point for a conversation about a new idea. So people seem to be very closed off to the new idea. But who's really fit? You're fit. I'm fit. But I don't know what gym you go to. We're in Orange County, so you got a couple gyms here that have some pretty athletic people. But let's go to Wichita and go to the Planet Fitness there. The people that are in the gym are no different than the people that are at the Pizza Hut next door. Not at all. And that is almost every gym in the world.
Is that more like your view of it when you've traveled around these places, or?
No, there's data on this.
Right.
So the leanest, best 1 percentile of males in the United States has 10.9% body fat. That's pathetic. That's almost like, that's not even visible abs. Maybe just the top, a little outline. But that's just pathetic. That's the best 1%. And that percentage body fat takes muscularity into consideration too. It's not just like, whatever, how good your diet is. So really, and here's another statistic for you. 1 in 6 males in the United States have used or are currently using anabolic steroids. 1 in 6. 1 in 6.
Of what age group is that?
Over 18.
Over 18?
Just over 18.
1 in 6.
So are 1 in 6 people super fit? No, not even close. I mean, go to the shopping mall, look around. There might be 1,000 people you see when you walk through a shopping mall. So that fit number, we're just talking males here. It's not 1 in 6. Is it 1 in 600? No. Is it 1 in 6,000? Maybe more like 1 in 60,000 people are really in exceptionally good shape. So why the hell do we care what they're doing? They're clearly genetic outliers, and that whatever they're doing does not apply to the rest of us.
Right.
And also, in the last chapter of the book, I explain what the genetic differences are. Did you read that chapter?
No.
That chapter's a bitch. So I can imagine, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of science here. It's just tedious, but it's worth it. That last chapter, read that chapter.
So give us a sort of a
rundown of that
rough
one.
summary of
yeah.
it.
The biggest difference between the people who put on muscle easily and become strength athletes and those who don't is where their tendons attach to the bone that moves.
So it's genetic.
From the core of the body. So, like, for example, everybody has a sternum attachment to the pectoral, right? And then your pectoral attaches somewhere, usually right here, before the beginning of the bicep. And the object of the pectoral is moving that bone, that humerus bone, towards the body. So even when I go cross body, I can feel, the thickness getting greater because the muscles are getting shorter and those cells are pulling together. Now, what if we had an individual that instead, here I'll use this arm so the camera can definitely see it. So instead of having an insertion here, the insertion is on the other end of the bone by the elbow. So the people that have this mutation, they have more leverage when they're in the weaker range of motion. So they have a stronger, weaker range. So they can always engage more in the weaker range. So it's almost like everything they do is using X3. Right? Because
so just
they're
so I
almost
get my head around
offloading
that.
or engaging more in that weaker range.
So people who are in the sort of more muscular section have got longer,
Longer moment arms.
Longer in their arms. People who are not as muscular are shorter. So if it's shorter, it's better to train in the way you're talking about than, is that?
It's better so there's 16 now NFL players I'm working with. It's better for everybody to use X3. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not just promoting my product. I mean, it's just a fact. Like, the strongest level of variable resistance, and there could be some other approach at some point, but there isn't now. Everybody's doing better. All the NFL players that I'm working with, all the NBA players, the entire Miami Heat, they stopped using weights and they're just using X3 now. And they even endorsed the book, and they put the endorsement on the back of the book, or they gave me permission to do that, and use the name of their team. Because usually when you're working with a team, you have to say like a football team that's based in Chicago, but you can't say Chicago Bears. But Miami Heat gave me permission because they really like it. It works. It works for the guys. It keeps their guys from getting injured. So they're stronger than ever.
So just explain me that short thing again. Just so So people who are not as muscular developed have got short. What do they call them?
No. You can't. You're getting. What if somebody doesn't work out and they have the great genetics? So it's if you have the longer insertion, then you are more likely to be able to build a greater amount of muscle mass.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you will. I mean, that guy might.
You've got the potential.
Yeah, that guy might just sit at home and play PlayStation.
So if you've got short ones, then what do? If you've got short ones, it's better to train in this way. Is that than regularly?
It's always better to train in variable resistance in all cases. But there's 23% of people are incapable of stimulating any muscular protein synthesis at all. I think that was the second reference in the book.
And why is that?
They can't engage. They can't engage enough muscle to cause fatigue. But they're lifting regular weights. It's different when you're using something that fatigues the entire musculature.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not that one will do better training with variable resistance. Everyone will do better training with variable resistance because the weak range is still the weak range and the strong range is still the strong range. Nobody has it reversed. Some just have more of an advantage when using regular weights, and some have a great disadvantage.
Right.
And so, but yeah, I mean, it ultimately doesn't matter. And so now, with this new approach, everybody can be as strong as that NFL player they like. Now, maybe they don't have the size to be a linebacker, and they look more like a wide receiver. Well, that's still cool. So, like everybody can grow more musculature as a result of this. And especially the majority of the population has that tendon disadvantage.
Right.
And so now we can do it.
Okay. Yeah. So what would you say is a worthy goal then for, let's talk about the average person, but what should be a worthy goal in terms of your general fitness? Is it like you say, you just want to be strong and lean and that's what you should aim for? Or does it include any, you mentioned, we'll come on to the cardio part of it, but strong and lean is great, but what about your sort of endurance and your sort of cardiovascular capabilities?
Sure.
For example, I love to do weights because I enjoy the feeling of it. For me, working out is also quite a sort of it's almost like a bit of a meditation. I like to run for a little bit, not too long, but 20 minutes along the beach is great, clears my mind, and I like lifting weight. I like doing squats, I like deadlifting, I like some of the Kaiser machines because that's a different approach. Ropes, for example, I enjoy that because it gets my heart rate up. So for strong and lean is great. That's one of the things I want to do. But I also like to be able to move better and do a bunch of other stuff. So what do you think is a worthy goal in terms of someone's fitness that's not an elite athlete?
Well, you certainly got to be comfortable when you move, and that has a lot. Skill training, like movement drills, sprinting and cutting, which cutting to one side or another. Like when I played rugby, I did a lot of that. I was an outside center, so I had to do a lot of running. Yeah, X3 doesn't do everything. It's not going to make you better at your skill drills because they're skills and you got to develop those independently. Now, when it comes to cardiovascular exercise, you get a better or equal cardiovascular health effect from strength training than you do from what we call cardio training.
Right.
Right. But cardio training, which is sustained more than 20 minutes, that's actually the magic number, 20 minutes. It's got to be more than 20 minutes, where you really start to aggressively upregulate cortisol. And if you do it like 3 times a week, that becomes a chronic elevation, which means your body protects body fat. So you don't lose your body fat, but you do lose your muscle. So it's really the opposite of what everybody wants, is what cardio gives you. Cardio's garbage.
Do you do people
I have good friends that are. I'm friends with Zach Bitter. He's the world record holder for the 100-mile run. I'm friends with him. I'm never going to go running with him. No way. I'll drive my car maybe. But that would destroy what I worked so hard to build. It would destroy my physique if I started getting into habitual distance running, because cortisol gets rid of muscle. Why would you want to upregulate that? Now, also, I'd like to say there's no such thing as a bad hormone. Cortisol has its purpose. A lot of things secrete a little bit of cortisol. Getting out of bed in the morning secretes cortisol. Drinking coffee, eating anything will get a little bit of cortisol going. But it's those high chronic levels that are the problem.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what in terms? So what you're saying is really, running under 20 minutes is not going to do you a lot of harm. But if you're trying to lose weight and you're running above that, there's science to say that isn't really what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
If it's weight loss.
There's a meta-analysis. There's more than 100 studies combined that demonstrate this. This information has been out there for 40 years. This is my best example of why the fitness industry is just a garbage industry, just trash. I know, you've been in the middle of it for a long time, so you probably don't like hearing it. It's okay.
It's okay. I'll get a balanced view on on what is the right thing to do.
Yeah. So just cardio is so bad because it's giving everybody the opposite of what they think they're getting, and then of course they're perpetually frustrated, and especially the ones that do cardio in isolation. I'm talking primarily about women who will go into the gym, do an hour of cardio, and they'll do that for 6 months, and then they'll see me out somewhere and they're just crying, why am I not, nothing has changed, and my scale weight went down a little bit, but my pants are even tighter, and I'm right, because you're gaining fat and losing muscle. because that's what cardio does. And if you think about it from an engineering perspective, your central nervous system is like your pit crew in Formula One. They're going to try and make adjustments to optimize you for the environment you're in. You can't talk to your central nervous system, but you can give it information. You can create a harsh environment. And really what you want to do is punish the cells of the body so that that central nervous system goes, we'd be better off if we got rid of some of this body fat and added some more muscle. Maybe some more strength in the tendons and ligaments too. That's what we all want. So we all want the sprinter's body. Well, then why the hell aren't we sprinting?
Yeah, I was
why are we going in the opposite direction? And what is a sprint really? It's high intensity, high force, because when you hit the ground when you're at speed, you get a lot more than your body weight. Right. You're getting 3 times your body weight. When you're just jogging or doing sustainable type cardio, it's just, I think it's like 1.2 times your body weight.
So what about like that? I think it's called Sprint 8, where you kind of you sprint hard as fast as you can for a period of time and rest. Sprint and rest is that something? Because I read the book a long time ago, but apparently that kind of releases a lot of growth hormone and improves your overall strength. So is that
stabilization firing? Some of the so I wrote a meta-analysis. The only meta-analysis I'll ever write. And the same co-author of the book, Henry Alkire, he was one of my co-authors in that project also. Never write a meta-analysis. It's just so punishing.
What is it?
It's when they take all the research on a particular subject, and they might filter it for certain parameters, and then rate the strength of each study based on things like sample size, duration. You ran a study with 1,000 people who only went for 2 weeks, and there's another study with 12 people that they ran for a year. Well, which is more powerful? Well, it kind of depends on what you're looking at and what the time scale of that is. So you have to weigh all those things and put your mathematics together, how you came up with, how you justified weighing one versus the other. And then you get like an answer of like the entire subject.
Right.
Like all the literature that's ever been published, again, based on a certain parameter. So this is the highest level of medical evidence. And so naturally, you'd imagine it would be. So when you look at some of the answers that have come out of meta-analyses, there's the one that I authored, and Henry, we looked at stabilization firing. Because what's going on when you look at a sprinter's skull? This is how I got the idea for doing this study. The skull doesn't move. The whole body is moving. I mean, they're throwing their hand back so they can pivot their pelvis and get a longer stride. Everything's moving in the body, but the skull is absolutely stabilized. It's because almost every muscle in the body is doing extra firing to keep the sprinter as balanced as possible so they can propel themselves forward with speed. Stabilization firing. I'm like, let's look at that. Let's look at, so the theory was stabilization firing upregulates growth hormone. Because if we can prove that, then we know things like vibration. Because vibration is also associated with higher levels of growth hormone, which is why it's been called a weight loss device, whole body vibration.
So why is it, just for it, like, is it important for both men and women then to upregulate growth hormone then?
It's incredibly important.
Right.
Growth hormone is really what it is when you're a child. It's really repair hormone when you're an adult. Mm-hmm. They should actually call it human repair hormone. Because it only plays into growth, like height and like your anatomy when you're growing. When you're done growing, you're done growing.
Right.
Nobody took growth hormone as an adult and got taller, right? So, and there's a lot of like concern that I think is misplaced, like, oh, it's going to enlarge the heart. Like, there's no evidence of that.
So is it so in terms of the way you're training, you want to be training in a way that's going to release your natural growth hormone, and
right.
Can you continue to release that throughout as you age? Is that still accessible?
Oh, yeah.
You can.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's in that meta-analysis too. Right. A couple of those things were now. It seems to appear the older you get, you get a higher IGF-1 level, which growth hormone, IGF-1 converts to growth hormone. But with older people, they seem to do more conversion as opposed to just creating more growth hormone itself, which not really sure what that means, but it's the same effect of the body. So anybody who's taken exogenous growth hormone or exogenous IGF-1, insulin growth factor 1 is what that stands for. They're basically the same thing, a little bit different timing in how they work. But, like there are bodybuilders who use those particular exogenous, meaning injection.
Right.
They're taking those and, just as drugs and performance enhancing drugs, and they get great results out of them. But our body makes those things.
Right.
And when our body makes them, they can't hurt us. Your body's not going to make anything to kill you.
So if you're in terms of your training, then if you're combining, X3 or band training with the vibration, that is optimum for helping you to release your natural growth.
That's right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So you just stand on like a vibration power plate or something and do the exercises. Is that?
Well, the growth hormone accelerator, which is a product that my company sells, it has the top of it is the X3 platform.
Okay.
And so you can do your X3 workout on the platform. Now, if you want to put the top of the X3 on a power plate, boy, it would be loud. I mean, it would make a terrible noise and probably beat up on the power plate, probably destroy the power plate eventually. But you could do it.
You could
certainly do it.
So,
there's a lot of great vibration products, and they're at all sorts of different price points. So, but you got to beware of like the $600 ones. Those are trash.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if it's, you also want to look for triplanar vibration. So not the fulcrum vibration, which is like a teeter-totter. You want uniform vibration, which is up and down, side to side, and forward and backward. So
does the
planes.
power plate do that? Or?
Power plate does that.
Does that,
yep.
right, okay.
Yep.
So
I'm a fan of the technology of power plate for sure.
So whilst you're on hormones then, so what about testosterone? Like obviously it's a big thing for men that want to put on muscle.
Yeah.
Is there a way that you can also, is there really a way that you can actually naturally stimulate testosterone through working out? Of course. And if so, how would you do that?
So testosterone, growth hormone has to do with stability. So the more your body has to self-stabilize. So like when I do an overhead press with the X3, like my core is just jackhammering to keep that weight, which is a weight that I would never be able to handle because as I lower it, it gets lower weight. As I raise it, when I get to the powerful position, it's a higher weight than I can normally handle. So I'm holding it up here and my core is just there's so much muscular contraction going on in my core to keep me stable. That's what's upregulating growth hormone while I'm doing that. And it's more of an upregulation because there's more stabilization firing because of the extra weight. But there are people who like kind of try and separate the two. They might lift or something like that. And then they'll do just vibration with their body weight. And then they'll put themselves in a disadvantageous position for balance, like standing on one foot or trying to stand on your toes on one foot. That's hard. And so that's another way.
Does that help to stimulate?
Those will stimulate growth hormone. Yeah, like I call it the sprint effect.
Right. And the reason, and what's happening then is when you're off balance or you're trying to balance, whether it's overhead or on one foot or whatever, it's engaging all of your different muscles, which then releases that hormone. Is that what?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And certain muscles will do it, and certain ones won't. Like your quadriceps won't have, like primary actors don't do it.
Okay.
It's the stabilization muscles.
Right.
So like hip flexors will do it, and they figured this out. They figured this out at NASA actually at one of their California facilities. They would put a percussor on a certain muscle and measure before and after blood tests, and then they would put the percussor on a different muscle. So they just push on a tendon ending and via irritation force that muscle to contract. And so certain muscles will and certain muscles won't. But the stabilization muscles, like your abdominals, your quadratus, your obliques, they will upregulate. So you don't have to worry about it if you're in a slightly unstable position lifting with variable resistance, so you can get to a heavier weight than you could ever handle. That really delivers a maximum result.
So what are the sort of top 2 or 3 hormone testosterone releasing exercises then, or movements?
So testosterone really just has to do with how heavy you go.
Right.
So, with X3, you're using, or I could say with variable resistance, you're using more force than you ever would with regular weight training. So, like, I'm holding 550 pounds here. I'm 44 years old. I'm never going to get under a bar with 500 pounds on. That'd be stupid. Like, and I think anyone who gets under a bar with 500 pounds, I have to question why they're doing it. Now, if they're a professional weightlifter, if that's their job, okay, I guess. I mean, I would say get a better job. Like, you ever thought about badminton? That pays too. Yeah, I mean, I see so many guys get so screwed up with weights, and I just see it as kind of thankless. Like, the reward is not worth the risk. But I get the benefit of hitting that 500 pounds and engaging all the musculature in that position where I'm not at risk of injury. And then the weight goes down as I go down into the joint compromising ranges of motion. So I get that benefit of hitting that really high weight and then the lesser weight and then the lesser weight till I basically just can't move. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, so you've got the ones in terms of testosterone, you're basically loading the muscle in a safe way.
Right, and the heavier you go, with the more repetitions you go, the more receptors are going to open up.
Okay.
So the key with testosterone is not having more testosterone itself, it's having more receptor site activity. You want the receptor sites to be open. So, like, for example, my testosterone has been like laser line the same since I was 28 years old. I had some testicular damage because of a bad rugby hit. You probably know how that goes. So I didn't have the right level of testosterone, so I got testosterone replacement therapy. By the way, for all the idiots out there who think that that's like a prescription for steroids, you should look up the WebMD definition. It's a considered natural level of testosterone, because that's what it is. That's what the R stands for, replacement. It doesn't mean more. Replacement doesn't mean more. It means replacement. So many clowns on the internet that want to argue at that point. I don't know why. I don't know why it's so hard for them to swallow. I think they want to imagine everybody's cheating but them, which makes them righteous and glorious. But they're just jealous and they haven't really tried lifting yet, so they're just losers. It's a lot of ego in fitness, and so that brings a lot of anger with people who don't succeed, and I understand why they don't succeed. They should read my book. Now, when we're looking at where the hell was I?
So you've got the testosterone, heavyweight through the end range.
Yeah. Benefit of the heavy is going to open up the receptor sites, and so I know why I brought that up.
And you need to be able to utilize the testosterone.
Mine hasn't been different. So, like, even from the time at 28 years old I got the prescription, I put on maybe 5 pounds of muscle in 10 years. So that's not what happens to somebody who's aggressively gaining muscle. That's pathetic. So then I turned 40, and then I gained 60 pounds of muscle with the same level of testosterone. What's the difference? Well, the difference was variable resistance, because I could now put heavier loads on my body, and those receptor sites were open, so they were using the testosterone I had. Before, I was probably just not using it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's for testosterone. And in terms of your growth hormone release, like, you mentioned the standing overhead press. Is that one of the best ones to kind of stimulate that, would you say?
The overhead press, the deadlift, and the squat are all self-stabilization type movements, especially one-legged squat.
Right.
Like, we focus on the one-legged squat for 2 reasons. One is more stabilization firing. 2 is you're not a kangaroo. You walk and run on one leg at a time. And your body is designed to provide resources to one leg at a time. When you try and squat with two legs, and people get so mad at me when I say a two-legged squat is really not a functional movement. It is for a kangaroo, but it's not for a
suppose
human.
it get off the toilet if you know.
Yes, really the only time you use both legs, yeah, but you could do a pistol squat right off the toilet, right?
Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah, give that a shot. Don't make a video of it. Or do. So what we have is like the only time we use two legs is when we stop. Like impact is when we use two legs. But we run on one leg at a time. So train one leg at a time and imagine how much further you can go. And here's where every weightlifter is going to start listening after I say this. What could your legs do if you put all your body's resources, all your oxygen, all your blood into one quadricep and one glute, as opposed to dividing them in half? One leg at a time. All the resources. Is that going to be a better training experience? Absolutely. Because those are the biggest draws of blood in the body. Two biggest muscles in the body. And we're going to work both legs at once? Why would we do that? So one leg at a time, and then you get incredible growth. Right. Yeah. And the stabilization firing.
Right. Yeah. So really then, if to sort of boil down, we've covered quite a lot of ground, but really you know, one of the things is the worthy goal that you said is, ideally for longevity is to be strong and lean.
Yep.
That's something to focus on. The optimum way to do that is to have, what do you call it? Progressive resistance? Is there a term for the variable resistance? Yeah. The optimal way to do that is with variable resistance. Yeah. And also in terms of engaging those hormones, it's you want to be doing that in a way where you're developing your stabilization or your balance in order to kind of make an effect. So that's really the recipe for guys that want to sort of look like you is just follow the book and
just follow the program. I tell people like all the time, like when I review something and you know anybody with a Harley Davidson motorcycle?
Yeah.
So I have a few friends with those, and they buy the motorcycle and they can't wait to fuck it up. They immediately want to like change the mirrors, and they got to get a different color like wheel, and they have to have a slightly different seat. It's customized. Like, and I just look at it.
It's an American thing.
Is
it
with
the cars as well?
Yeah. People screw up cars all the time. They put like thin tires on like a classic car. Like that's not how things were back then.
Extra exhausts and
right. You just took a nice car and you screwed it up.
And they do the jack wheels here as well.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, maybe it is an American thing. Of course you'd say that. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, we can make fun of the United Kingdom too. But my point is that people get an exercise program and they can't wait to mess with it. Because I guess they think they're going to like make some little tweak and it's going to be twice as good. No. Like a lot of research went into the program the way it is. And I just tell them, follow the program. This is the way. Like don't question it. Just do it. And I've seen thousands of people try and mess with the program, do it a little bit different way. And they don't succeed because they don't understand the principles that are laying underneath it. They don't understand what hypoxia is. I could do another hour lecture on hypoxia if you wanted. They don't understand the difference between sarcoplasmic and myofibril growth. There's two types of growth that are happening with every exercise you do. Most people don't know that. Most people don't know if you exercise in sort of what they call a rest pause manner, which is a stupid name. It doesn't even barely describe what it is, but it's like one rep and then you rest and another rep and then you rest. You're denying hypoxia, you're denying sarcoplasmic growth. You might get a little myofibril growth out of that. So 2/3 of your growth potential you just threw in the trash. So like they don't know what they're doing, right? Because they didn't do all the research. They don't understand. So it's just follow the program. This is the way. And it's like, the great followers I have, they just repeat me, this is the way. Yeah. And I'm serious about that. Like, don't mess with it. And way too much research went into this for you to just go, oh, I'll just use it in my own customized way. No, dude, don't. Then if you're going to do that, then just go get TRX and suck your thumb. Just like fucking baby. Like, I don't care.
And the final sort of question on this, that like we've had some guests that have been talking about fascia. There's obviously a lot of new research in that and how to train the fascia.
Yeah.
How does that fit into your, you know, is that something you've done any research on? And if so, does that play a part in the kind of training methods that you teach at all?
There's an entire chapter on that and about superhydration of the muscle and then stretching while it's superhydrated. When you stretch the casing of the muscle, you allow for hyperplasia, which is the splitting of muscle cells. And we have a whole protocol for that. So you combine your workout with a little bit of carbohydrate. It's a very calculated amount, so you don't have a big insulin event. I mean, you're going to have an insulin event, but it's going to be small because you're going into the workout fasted, and you want to be optimal, so the blood's not flowing to the intestines, it's flowing to the muscle. Combine that with a vasodilation agent, which could be Hydromax.
What's Hydromax?
Oh, it's a supplement that
Is it like that beetroot sort of thing?
I don't know.
It's a beetroot supplement that...
It's not made of... Hydromax is not made of beetroot.
Right.
Hydromax is... I don't remember how it's made.
Okay.
But it was actually on the banned substances list for a long time. But you can get it at any nutrition store or online. You can get it on Amazon. But it just superhydrates the muscle. But it does it via vasodilation. So, you know, like caffeine is vasoconstriction. This is opening everything up. Now, the other way to do vasodilation...
Some of the pre-workouts, though, is that sort of like... does that... I know we're going around a bit, but like, do a lot of the pre-workouts not have caffeine in it then, which reduces contracts the...
So there's a benefit to both vasoconstriction and vasodilation, and you can take benefit out of both because your body will enact vasoconstriction when you're doing work. Right. But when you're relaxing, you won't have as much vasoconstriction, especially if you've taken a vasodilator or if you have a blood demand in your extremities. So, or just in musculature in general. So you basically, if this is the range of what you'd have for sort of standard arterial flexibility, if you take a vasoconstrictor, you're like further on the constriction side. You take a vasodilator, you move out here. But you still have a wider range when you have both in your system.
Right.
So like there's no conflict is my point. The best vasodilator, of course, is Viagra.
Really?
Yeah, and there's a great study that says that put some people through some workouts, and they didn't do the
well, you have that before your workout.
Yeah, it's for more blood delivery to the muscle,
right.
and it stretched the fascia.
Wow.
So Viagra will enact what is being talked about there, and will provide for more muscular growth. But you got to take it at the right time.
Is there side effects of doing that in the gym then, like, you know?
Sure. I mean, yeah. Hey, I work out at home. There's a reason.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, the jokes are free. Yeah, I haven't had a problem with it. Yeah, I mean, when you're focused on your workout, yeah, but, you know, if you work out with your girlfriend, it could be a problem.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But... So look, just to wrap up, I've learned a lot. I've watched a bunch of your stuff and tried to get my head around it, and I can kind of see why
you sick
some
of my
people.
Voice yet?
No, it's all good.
Most people are.
I can see though why there's you obviously are sort of a kind of troll magnet, I guess, with some of the stuff.
Hell yeah, I am. Well, the more trolls I get, the more they invite their friends to come and make fun of me. And then there will be a percentage of those friends that gets the book and reads it. And then they say, like, this guy is totally onto something. Like, there's no way he's scamming anybody because what I read makes perfect sense. And it also points out why what we're doing with regular weightlifting, a lot of people, most people, 99.9% of people get nothing out of it. It totally makes sense. Yeah. So, yeah, if you have questions, like, read the book.
Yeah. So, before we finish then, if people, what's some of the stuff you've got going on? If people want to find out about more about you, your, the clinics, the books, just let us know what you've got going on at the moment and where people can find more.
So I created a landing page with links to everywhere because it was tedious to hit every place. You can find everything on drj.com.
Okay.
So it's DOCTOR, the letter J.com.
Okay, and we'll put that in the show notes and emails and everything. Okay.
Cool.
And then final question. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. What would be an example of escaping your own limits?
Jesus, everything I've done. I'm really good at something that got me in a lot of trouble as a kid. I was always like the class clown. And when someone tells me I can't do something, I'm fucking doing it. Like you can't drive your car 200 miles an hour. Really? I hand the. I probably shouldn't say anything else. It'd be pretty incriminating. But yeah, like
you're a rebel.
I'm just not going to be told what to do. And when somebody says you can't or that's not the way it works, I say, "Are you sure?" Like 2 masks are better than 1. Where's the evidence on that? Like I jumped all over people that were like all of a sudden wearing like the 2, coronavirus masks. Where'd you read that? Give me that clinical reference. It turns out it was bullshit. Fauci just made it up. And he admitted, like, yeah, sorry, I didn't have any evidence, but so I'm always second guessing what I'm told, which is why I actually like, about half of the trolls are just skeptics. Half the people are like, yeah, they're angry, yeah, they're dumb because they spoke before they read. So they didn't really know what they were talking about. But then I'll say something, and usually the ruder I am, the more they'll want to read the book so they can criticize me more. So it's kind of by design. Like I really want to rattle the cages because they all come over. And my biggest haters have multiple versions of my product. They just want to, they just hate the fact that I'm successful. And I can't do anything for them. Like I really wish I could help them, but they want to see me burn. Well, I'm not going to do that. So I'm not quitting anytime soon. And everything's getting bigger and better all the time, including me. So, I'm sorry, guys, but, it's the way it is. So they love the pictures with, my Lamborghini and on great vacations. And I got a lot of hate out of doing a workout in front of the Parthenon from my hotel balcony window. Like they're really mad about that, but it's like what they're really mad at is themselves because they haven't done anything. They're pretty sad people. Like there's an article in Forbes that says internet trolls are just losers, and that's what they're angry at themselves because they've never succeeded. So they see someone who's successful, especially in the space that they're in, and it makes them very hateful because it's an everyday they see me, it's a reminder that they have not achieved. No. And so
and I guess some of it
I'd really rather them focus their energy instead of yelling at me. It's like the expression, winners focus on winning, losers focus on winners. Yeah. Losers are always complaining about the winner. No, don't look at the winner, look at the finish line. Like, I'm not stopping them from doing anything. They can do something creative, that's fine. Or get a better job, maybe, I don't know.
I guess some of it as well, it's a very different way of looking at things, and some of it, like it's taken, we've been speaking for almost a couple of hours on and off camera, and some of it's just trying to understand, there's a lot of parts to pull together, and I guess some of it is it's a genuine, like, okay, I've not heard that, it doesn't make sense, I've not seen it before, but, tell me how that, right. How that works. So, well, look, hopefully it's provoked, if nothing else, whether you agree or not, hopefully it's provoked people to at least think about things differently and, maybe go on their own path of sort of researching things and finding a better and more effective and efficient way of working out. So, that's right. John, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming down. And,
thanks for having me. This was great.
Thank you very much.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.